really excited to welcome you all to Real Estate at Work. I'm your host, Lekha Devta, and this meetup started in person 3 years ago in Seattle, Washington. We went virtual last year, and this has really given us the ability to bring on some high performers, investors, entrepreneurs, and really provide a platform for all of our guests to network with new and seasoned investors from all over the country. My last guest, Matt Onofrio, just finished writing his book and signed a contract with Bigger Pockets to release his book in summer next year. So be on the lookout for that because it's a killer book. And if you were here last month, he actually read us a chapter of the book and it was just spectacular. So be sure to look at that. All right. I could not be more excited for today's guest. My buddy, my very, very good friend, AJ Osborne. AJ is CEO of Cedar Creek Wealth, a self-storage investing firm, and owns over 200 million assets under management. He's the author of Growing Wealth in Self-Storage. Great book. It's a step-by-step guide about, guess what? Investing in self-storage. He also hosts a couple podcasts. Now, I had the extreme pleasure of meeting and hanging with AJ's amazing family, his 4 kids, his beautiful wife, Tessa, who I just absolutely love. She's such a rock star. And I also had the pleasure of meeting AJ's dad, Ron Osborne. And Ron's on the meetup. Like, you have to find Ron and private message him and be like, hey, Ron, because Ron is amazing. Like, AJ is okay, but Ron is amazing. So Ron, welcome. I'm so happy you could make it. Ron,
thank you very much.
Yes, I'm so happy you're here. Ron used to be an insurance guy, and he was the one that stumbled on self-storage and brought it to AJ like almost 20 years ago. So, and I've absolutely enjoyed talking to Ron. Now, AJ did go through a pretty life-changing experience fairly recently. He became paralyzed overnight and ended up being in a coma for almost 10 weeks. I've had long conversations with AJ and his wife, Tessa, about what they went through. And I can tell you this, seeing AJ here, watching him thrive and living his best life is nothing short of inspiring. I couldn't be more proud of him. So AJ, my friend, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here with you as always.
AJ, can you cover for us some of the things that I may have missed? Tell us, a little bit about your background. Love to hear from you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I obviously do self-storage. That's what I do. I love it. It's an amazing asset class. It has all the wonderful values that all of us love of real estate. But I actually started out not liking real estate at all. It was a very, what I believed, inefficient use of capital. So I followed in my father's footsteps and sold insurance. So we were insurance salesmen, right? And it was awesome because I was like, I'm in charge of my own life. I got paid commissions. I never, had a normal W-2 job in my life. I started working while in college for a company called Aflac, the one with the duck. And then I just went straight to selling insurance. And the reason I liked that was because of what I felt was control. I felt if I wanted to make more money, I could go out and make it, right? And I thought, man, having a W-2, I didn't like because I felt that was not having the control within my life. And I thought, this is how you actually make money, right? And I am going to do what my dad does and be in insurance because it's so interesting. As everybody knows, all kids grow up to want to be in insurance. It's a childhood dream. So, I fulfilled that dream and started selling insurance. And it was really good, but it was interesting. Right out of college, I was trying to get into real estate because that's what everybody did. I had friends that I was always really interested in business and economics. I was super interested in how the economy works. I lived in Brazil and in a lot of poverty. And I grew up where we could talk openly about this stuff, right? So when I started looking at all my young friends that were all becoming millionaires, and they were all investing and everything else, and I wasn't. I was selling insurance, and my wife worked as a waitress, which she made more money than I did. So we lived off her income as I tried to build up clientele and everything. It was one of those FOMO moments. Like I was like, I am being left behind. And it's not that I think I'm an incredibly smart guy, but at the same time, I feel like, hey, I get this stuff. Why can't I do this? And that was pretty hard for me, but it was at a time that I didn't understand what was going on. And what was going on is this is pre-2008, so we all know what was actually going on. So all my friends that were becoming millionaires and they owned all these properties, I was trying to buy fourplexes and duplexes and everything I could because I wanted to get in the game, but it didn't cash flow. It didn't make sense. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't make this work. That was really, really frustrating. But my dad had bought this small storage facility. I lived out in nowhere land, Idaho, literally like it's over by Yellowstone and the Tetons. It was out in the middle of nowhere. And that's where this little storage facility was. And I had actually never been in a storage facility.
Wow.
So I don't know anything about this, right? And I walked in, I'm trying to get fourplexes, I'm trying to get multifamily or single units and figuring out all these ways, no cash down and just all this stuff that was really, really popular at the time. But I couldn't make it work. And so my dad was like, hey, look at this thing, right? So I go up and I sit down, I'm trying to figure out how this thing even works.
Right.
Now, it's important to understand the context, I think, of this and investing in general, because at the time, self-storage was, it's not only that it wasn't sexy, it was very looked down upon. We couldn't get banks to finance it. Right. Nobody wanted these things. It was a dirty asset class that a lot of people honestly felt like it was a fad, right? So we looked at it, but the difference was it cash flowed, and it cash flowed really good. So being a salesperson, all I understood was cash flow. I didn't understand equity games that people were playing. Like me and my dad, we just knew cash flow. If we don't have cash, we can't pay bills. And if we run out of cash, I got to go sell something. So it was really simple investing strategy. And he's like, let's go out and do this. So I was like, let's do it. We started getting small ones, but it was just not very good, to be totally honest. Like it didn't, I was like, we're putting all of this money, this effort and everything. It just doesn't make a lot of money. So let's keep going in the business world. Let's make sales. Because I looked at it as I have one property and this property makes a little amount, or I could go out and sell a client, or I have a job that pays me X amount. And I'm like, those things are not comparable. So I really kind of stuck doing what I was doing. And we tried to grow the sales side. We tried to grow all this. And the economy crashed. We had multiple properties at the time. And we rode through it. We were all cash flow. We didn't do anything off equity, so we had no problem, right? And we focused on selling. But it was at that time that a few things surprised me, and I learned a few things that were very interesting. First of all, everyone that I knew that was making it when I wasn't ended up going bankrupt. And they were not investing in real estate like we know and most people focus on today. It was speculation. And I worked with business owners because I was a consultant on their benefits all over the country. We really did. And I had to go through the Great Recession working with these companies and people that were worth tons of money and help them as their business went bankrupt and they lost everything. And when they lost something, I would lose something. My income would go away. Then that also spurred on a next thing in the economy, which was a big increase in mergers and acquisitions because of the need of cash flow, things like that, which then took away more of my clients. And I learned a very valuable lesson. I'm not actually financially free. I'm not my own boss. And my upside is extraordinarily limited because the thing that real estate had that I didn't have was an ability to compound my returns, not associated with my time. My sales job, it had to be me. That capped out. It didn't compound. In fact, every time I lost one, I had to run and get a new one. And that's when I realized I'm on a treadmill. And that's what I called it. I was like, I'm on a treadmill here.
I love that analogy.
And, and so many of us feel that way. And we feel that way like in life in general. And like, I come from a family, like my father was in extreme poverty, not like poor, like we think of today, right? Food stamps. Right. No, there's no water. There's no indoor plumbing. There's no bathroom. Wow. Kind of poverty. And my mom was a farmer. So I was raised in Idaho by some rural farm people that, the greatest thing in the world is how hard you work. And that's something that is very core on my beliefs, right? Like it's whoever works the hardest, they get the one up, right? It's like, right. Oh, well, what did you do today? Well, I was up at 5 and I worked till 10:30 at night. And then the other one tries to up them, right? Like that is your badge of honor. That was your badge of honor when you come from a farming community in Idaho. And I don't mind working at all. In fact, I love it. But I hate doing the same thing and not going anywhere. That to me was insanity. So I'm sprinting on this treadmill and I just was like, I don't know where this goes. I don't know how this ends, but we're stuck. And that to me doesn't make sense to work so hard, but not to move forward. And so as we're going through the recession and everything, we decide, listen, I go and I talk to my dad and I'm like, hey, I think we should go really into real estate. And I sat down, I said, I think we should really go all in on the self-storage thing. And he immediately loved it and was like, yes. Right. And it was like, I think for both of us, it was a path out. It was a path off our treadmills. And so we got super excited. Like, it was like, yes, let's do this. Now, we understood, though, it wasn't something that would turn around quick. I did a lot of work on fundamentals of investment theory, risk analysis. I read endlessly, and we knew this was going to take a long time. So when we started our real estate, really moving into real estate in a big, big way like we did, as in we're going to leave what we're doing to real estate. We worked 2 full-time jobs, both of us. So we still sold insurance, and we put all our money back into real estate for years, because we wanted to have a centrally integrated real estate firm. Now, this is very important. What that means is we needed to be able to manage, we needed to be able to fund, we needed to be able to operate, acquire, and everything within, because that's how I knew if we were going to get to where I really wanted to go in the future, we needed to do that. Now, not everybody needs to do it the way we did it at all. In fact, for most people, the way we did it's probably not a good idea. That was our circumstances and our opportunities and what led us to that place. But it was really too where we wanted to get and the goals we were trying to achieve. And it took a while, but we really started after years seeing the big fruits of that labor. And in fact,
you're almost like paving a path for all these people that want to invest in self-storage, because there's so much to learn from your experience.
Yeah.
From your book, from just listening to your podcast. Like, this is amazing. And I'm sure this wasn't around when you started.
No, there was nothing.
There was nothing.
We were figuring it out as we went. There was no podcast. There was no social media. There was no bigger pockets. There was no books. It was literally like we were acquiring and trying to figure out what to do. And this is what I tell people all the time too. Like, if I had to look back to when I first started investing in real estate, there was no bigger pockets. There was no Facebook groups. There was no meetup groups, right? And forget like virtual stuff. There's nothing. And so like, I literally had to figure it out. I could not listen to a podcast and be like, that's a mistake I should avoid. So it's almost like someone starting today has an advantage over someone that started 8-10 years ago. Big time. And the opportunities, first of all, to connect. So let's say you want to go do a deal, but you can't sign on the bank note, right? So the bank's not going to accept you. Well, we know that you can get a KP, a key person that can sign on the banknote again, right? Well, you were really isolated to a few people you knew, right? There wasn't a way to go out to real estate groups to say, I have a deal. This is what this deal looks like. Would anybody like to KP? None of that existed.
No.
Right? That you have access to just infinite opportunity. And there's no problem today in real estate that you can't solve on the internet.
And
there's none.
That's why I tell people, like, grow your network, grow your tribe. I'm fortunate to have AJ and Ashley and all these rock stars amidst, my sphere, like in my sphere. And I just learn and get inspired by watching them grow. And I'm like, that makes me want to push harder, So
100%.
Always grow your network and go find those people that are doing things and are in a place that you want to get to. And speaking of that, like, I met AJ, I want to say in 2019, like a few years ago, at a mastermind that Brandon Turner and Tal Yarbrough put together in Maui. The first time I met AJ, he was in leg braces. He was learning to walk after something horrific had happened to him. And just meeting him, even the very first time I met him, I saw this resolve to kick ass, no matter the circumstance. So AJ, I want you to walk us through what happened there. Just give us a story.
Yeah. So we've gone, it's, I think it's a perfect example of never rest on your laurels. So we had gone through, we were building our real estate company. I was running a department for a big national brokerage firm. We were making good money. And I had real estate. It was like kind of the best of both worlds, right? I had this big corporate America paying me with golden handcuffs. And I had a real estate portfolio that was growing. And it was like, this will just continue to be great. And we had just had our fourth child. So life was awesome. Like, and when I say just like, I mean, within a few months. And it was in the middle, it was the end of first week of October. And we were down in California at an event, and I'd gotten sick. And we didn't really know anything about it, right? We didn't know. It was just, when you were sick back in pre-COVID and nobody cared. It was like, well, take some medicine. And so I just took some medicine, went home, and I was out planting trees. My legs were really hurting that night, and I didn't know why. And we thought it was because from planting the trees. I went to the hospital. They're like, dude, you're as healthy as a horse. They're like, you're totally fine. There's nothing is wrong with you. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't go to the doctor a lot. I'm like, I don't know why I feel this way. But we went home, the kids went to bed, and I went to try to make my legs stop hurting. I got in the tub. And then I went to get out of the tub, and my legs didn't work. And I was like trying to get out. I'd been in there for a while because I was in pain. And I just called to my wife, and I was like, my legs won't work. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, my legs won't work. I'm in the bathroom. She comes walking in, still totally not really understanding what I'm talking about. And I'm like, I can't get out of the tub. And so she grabbed me, pulled me out, picked me up, and took me into the car, and called the neighbors, said, go take care of the kids. I'm taking you to the hospital. We ran to the hospital, and for multiple days, they tried to figure out what was wrong with me. They couldn't figure out there was nothing wrong that they could see or understand. And then by the time they figured it out, it was, we've got to get you to the much bigger hospital that can take care of you. Shortly after, they put me into a coma because they had to attach me to tubes on life support. And then I woke up paralyzed from head to toe. I could not speak. I could not communicate except for blinking. And there was no time frame in which I was leaving. There was no expiration date. And so I got passed around to 2 different hospitals. Then they sent me to what's called an LTAC, which is a long-term care facility. that was made to take care of people like me that couldn't live without being on life support and with no date to leave. And so
My
I
God.
went there, and my family hung around me, and it was there in the LTAC that I was fired from my job. So because we didn't know when I was leaving or what would ever happen, but it was clear I was not going back to work anytime soon. And at that point, it wasn't clear that I would ever return to work, period. I was let go from my job, and my boss flew down, let me go. And then I sat around now unemployed in the hospital with 4 children and an infant baby who hung around me in the hospital. In fact, I have a video I can kind of show. Do you want me to show you?
I'd love that.
Do you see that?
Yep.
All right. So here's the first one. This is me trying to communicate and talk. My eyes were partially paralyzed. Everything was paralyzed. I obviously couldn't talk because I couldn't even breathe. But they're trying to understand what I wanted. They had some papers that I'd try to look through and everything, but mostly I couldn't eat, drink, nothing else. So they used a little sponge and they tried to dab my lips and my mouth to keep me feeling better. And I just kind of chew on it. And that was the only liquid. You can hear my baby, but that was my only liquid I got. And then from there, after months, I started to gain slowly movement back. And I had to relearn how to do everything like a child. I had to relearn how to eat. I had to relearn how to, see, just like your little kid when they eat, man, I did a good job, see. I started just being able to use my fingertips, and it just slowly started to come back.
It's like every time I hear you talk about this or I watch that, it's not my first time watching it. It just like gets me. It's like how could you go through that and like you're sitting here and you're just like so happy you're here today.
Yeah, it's one of those things that being healthy, I was 32 or whatever, 33, out of the blue. There was it was something called Guillain-Barré. I had a variant that was extraordinarily severe, and nobody could figure it out. Nobody really knew what to do. Mm-hmm. It was, I was not the person that anything like that should have ever happened to. It was completely it swept our legs out from underneath us.
Yeah, because you were young, you were healthy.
Very.
Right? Like you were planting trees, for crying out loud.
Yeah, I was outdoors, a hiker, skier, very active, very, very healthy. It was so out of the blue, nobody understood it or whatnot. Right. And the hardest part about it was there was no answers.
Wow.
There was no, oh, well, this will happen. Am I going to walk again? We don't know. Mm-hmm. Am I going to be able to live life not in a wheelchair? We don't know. Yeah. So I went to a rehab facility, and after I could get off the ventilator and the machines, they put me in a rehab facility where I worked, and then my insurance company kicked me out of that. So I went home, paralyzed in bed, where my wife took care of me, and my brother moved into our house to carry me around and take care of me and help my wife with our 4 kids. And that was my new life with no help, no doctors, no anything after that. There was no answers. There was no medicine to take. Right. Except for pain medicine. I was in pain 24/7, never stopped. I didn't sleep. I just be in pain till I sweat and passed out. And that was my new life. That was the new me. And
how long did that take, that process?
So it's been years, 4 years. I'm still partially paralyzed in my lower legs. So my ankles, feet, calf muscles, but I am walking on my own. I stopped going to rehab after they told me that I would never get out of leg braces and I'd never be able to walk on my own again. So without help with a walker or something like that. And so at that point I was like, well, there's no reason to come here. So I just stopped going, and I just went home, and me and the kids, and we just worked on it. And we just got up every day and I said, we're just going to keep moving and keep going, and just didn't look back.
I had the pleasure of spending 2 whole weeks with AJ about 2 weeks ago. And I can tell you that there's nothing about his demeanor or his attitude that ever makes you pause to think that he is still partially paralyzed. There's nothing in his mindset. In fact, he parties way harder than any of us. He's always in good spirits. He's ready for anything. Like, he is such a trooper. So, kudos to you. I think that requires really a certain kind of mindset, right? You have to kind of tell yourself that, hey, every day is worth living for, right? Because any day it could be taken away from you. I want to kind of dive into that. Like, what was your mindset before this happened, and what is your mindset now?
It's interesting when I look at pre-paralyzed and after, it's very, very different in many, many ways. I think a few things changed very dramatically. I think I was very nervous probably about a lot of things. I probably had anxiety like most people do about a lot of things. I think I cared a lot about things that don't matter. And most of that stuff went away. And whenever it bugs me today, I just try to remind myself. And, when I was fully paralyzed, I was fully alert in my mind.
Right.
So I could see everything that was going on. I could know everything. But I was in constant pain. So when things started to come back and every little thing was a miracle. Like, it was beyond amazing. Like, I mean, I still remember my first drink of water that I had.
Wow.
It was just like, even just saying it, like I can feel it on my tongue. It was just incredible. And going through that, just years of everything being so exciting, right? Years later saying, I can move my toe. And that just being like, what? Like, it changes, I think, the way you value everything around your life, but it also changes the way you act. And it was everything that I do, I'm going to do it big, which I always kind of had an extreme personality anyways, but there's just no time to waste. So I'm not going to stop. I'm going to utilize the time that I have, and I'm going to use it right. And that became kind of my whole focus. It was, I was in survival mode for so long that it wasn't a matter of, are you doing okay or not? Like, a lot of people were like, could you believe what had happened to you? Things like that. And to be honest, it was like opening up my eyes thinking, did I die? So there wasn't like this pondering of like, oh, I used to be okay, and I can't believe this is happening and I'm down on myself. It was just trying to survive. And then after it got out, it was a realization as I sat in the hospital that there was the person that left this hospital now after months and months was going to be one of two people. It was going to be AJ, the paralyzed guy, or it was going to be something else that I would create. And that idea terrified me, not being paralyzed. That didn't terrify me. I accepted that very quick. I was very happy in my wheelchair, and I was very happy to be able to use my arms and to talk. I was very content with that. Content's not the right word, but I was very grateful for that. And being paralyzed, not being able to walk again didn't necessarily bother me, but it bothered me thinking that my identity would become this new person, and that's how people would think of me, that's all you are, and that's what it is, and that I would end up just going home and sitting at home on disability or something, and that would become my life, and I would only be able to identify with this thing. And I knew that I had to make a conscious effort to not become that person and to become the person that I wanted to be, even though I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that person was going to be. I'd lost my job, everything that I knew, insurance and all this stuff. And I came out of it. I have all these kids who used to think that I was this, towering, I was their hero and everything. And I'd been whittled down to nothing person that can't even take care of himself, can't even get out of bed.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even sure how to create this new person. So then it became obsessively, compulsively, just move forward, just do the next thing, become anything, just move. And what are you going to do? What is going to be your stamp? And how are you going to end up leaving this world? Because I almost did. And I just tried to, everything became more important. And everything that I wanted to do became much, much more important.
I hope this is such an inspiration for everybody, because we can all make excuses, right? Like, oh, I'm still like learning about real estate investing, or I'm still looking for the money. And last year, AJ said something so profound to me. He said, look, if you want to get into self-storage, just do it. Once you have the deal, the money will come, the team will come, everything will follow. Just go find your deal. So, just like that, like your mindset is so important. And it's amazing. The chat is blowing up with people saying your attitude is, just so important. And you have the best attitude, and that you are a rock star. Thank you for sharing that. I think if you could share with us like a chart of your assets under management, that would be amazing for people to see like what you've accomplished. Like, insane.
I'd love to show that. Let me open this up here.
Sure thing. Okay.
So this is kind of a walkthrough of what we're doing. So in self-storage, I'll do this first by net rentable square feet, because in self-storage, we're weird, and that's how we measure things. So this is our net rentable square feet, of which I became paralyzed right about here. Wow. And we had my job working full time. We were building out our management company, and we were really trying to focus on growth and how much we would do. But right now, this year, we'll end up with about 2.3 million square feet. That includes three development projects we're currently developing in, and our acquisitions through this year. So as far as valuation goes, I'm not including the developments or anything in that, because we don't have that right amount. And valuation, as we all know, is hard, because it's really literally kind of what the market would put or anything. So we value this at, I think it was whatever, just over probably norm. It's not what we're seeing portfolios sell at, but I think it's the best way to value it, because I don't want to put it at some stupid high number or something like that I'm just making up. So we've built in this model where we could keep compounding out our growth, and we centrally integrated the management, the funding, the acquisition, the syndication part of it, everything else. And you can see, I gotta now start this over again. Hold on. Let me go to this. There we go. Present that. You can see this big change, right? And we were already going, and we were already aggressive, but this was a decision where I'm fine. I can live on my own, right? I become financially free. I actually didn't need my job. It was painful to lose that income, of course, but I didn't have to have it. I didn't lose my house. So I could have sat at home in a wheelchair if I wanted to. But it was at that time where it was, what am I going to do? What are we going to do for me, for others? And, I remember actually I was sitting in the hospital, and it was Christmas Eve, and I was going to go see my kids. They were going to take me home on Christmas morning, and I think it was 3 hours to watch my kids open presents before they took me back to the hospital, to the rehab center. And I was so excited. It was snowing outside, and I was like, I'm going to get to go home. I'm going to see my kids. It's going to be Christmas. And I had now been fired. It had been months, and there was no worry. What are we going to do? Am I going to lose my house? Is my wife going to have to leave me at home and can't take care of her now, quadriplegic husband at home. Why she has to go get a job just to try to put food on the table, right? And that is the power of real estate.
Right.
And that is the power of financial freedom. And it was so impactful and important to me that the next day I started up my blog, which eventually turned into my podcast and my book and everything else. And then I also started a syndicating company because I wanted others to be able to participate in that freedom and growth alongside us. And it was this moment of, I've been given a second chance and I need to have a much larger impact on everything that I'm doing. And that kind of became my theme. And let me see if I can do this without messing everything else, but I put impact, freedom, and progress
Love
up on my wall. And that's my defining focus and my defining core thing that I always think we need to be making an impact. We need to be creating true freedom for individuals, ourselves, and others. And at the end of the day, there is not a goal that we hit and we stop. We never, ever stop. It is all about progress and that we're always improving and becoming better.
Oh my God, I want to talk about progress. And I'm actually going to get to that in the next segment. But I have so many questions with regard to just self-storage that I want to spend like a couple minutes on this.
Do it.
So first up, you often say that self-storage is the best asset class for a new investor breaking into commercial real estate. Mm-hmm. Why do you think so?
So there's two reasons why I think self-storage offers the best opportunity for anyone that's trying to get into commercial real estate. And it's really a numbers game. It's not that I'm personally invested, right? Remember, I view real estate, just like businesses, things like that, is a vehicle for you to use to accomplish goals. I don't inherently love metal boxes. Now, I love what it provides and everything like that. So I'm agnostic to the investment type, but I am not agnostic to the opportunity. So in self-storage, for example, the amount of ownership of individual small assets that are achievable for people to buy and acquire in relation to institutional grade and owned is very skewed compared to the rest of them. Meaning there are lots and lots of individually mom and pop owned storage facilities across this nation. In fact, there's 72% of all of them are this way. That means in other asset classes, if you look like apartments, other things like that, it's inverse. 80+% are all institutional owned. You're fighting with big boys. Very small percentage of retail, right? Office buildings, apartment buildings, hotels are owned by individual mom and pop people. It's just not how it works. So self-storage offers an opportunity for you to acquire. So it's not even necessarily anything else. It's just you actually have an opportunity as far as numbers. And also, in comparison to other asset classes like office buildings, right, or hotels or other things, there's just a sheer quantity. You're talking, there are more storage facilities than there are McDonald's, Starbucks, and a whole bunch of other things combined. So it's a numbers game. And so many of these assets are very cheap when we're talking about commercial real estate. I'm talking about under $1 million. Now, under $1 million now for a lot of the United States is cheap just in housing.
Right. I mean, oh my God.
It's crazy, right? Yeah. So that just.
And to have like a cash producing asset under $1 million, just like that you don't really have to manage.
That's diversified by doors. So I look at risk and how risk is associated with a single tenant or very few tenants. You have concentration of risk, right? Amongst a few doors, right? Or whatever it is. Well, storage units, there's generally lots of them. We have probably over 10,000 doors, right? So at a single facility that I'm buying today, I have like 1,200 doors.
Wow.
My risk allocation is spread out, right?
Yeah.
And that offers a few things. First of all, lower risk, but it also offers things that make it a dynamic asset because of the lease structure combined with the type. So it's not long-term leases. Now, when we got started, everybody said that made it more risky. They said, listen, in a recession, first of all, people are going to default on their storage unit before they default on anything else, especially their home. Nobody's going to default on their home and not and pay a storage unit, right? They're going to default on the storage unit and pay their home, which never made sense to me because one costs $1,200 a month and the other's $50 a month. That doesn't make sense, right? So if I got a default, who cares about the $50? It's the $1,200 a month.
Exactly.
And then you also have the fact that there was month-to-month leases, and everybody said it's so dangerous. Yeah. Because everybody can leave at one time. Now, let me structure this correctly. I do agree that the lease structure, like on multifamily, is a much safer cash flow projection and everything by far than self-storage. I'm not saying that it's not, but in self-storage, I can up rent 40% in 2 months.
Yeah, there's no way I can do that.
Yeah. So the opportunity to improve cash flows is unprecedented in self-storage, right? We were cash flow people. All we focused on was revenue. What's the revenue doing? What do I have to buy it at? And how can I improve the revenue? It's a business. It's not real estate. It's a business. Let's focus on the income. Let's focus on the revenue. And self-storage offered us the way to run the business to improve the assets. Now, when I say this and you say, well, I don't know anything about business, this was our strategy. We're going to collect bills. Yeah. And when people call, we'll answer the phone. It wasn't rocket science, right? It just wasn't, we were actually picking up the phone. We actually made people pay their bills. And then we tried to up rates. That was it. And that's how we got started. And that's how we built. Now we do all sorts of things like dynamic pricing and revenue management, where we're shifting and fluctuating all sorts of revenue, which creates incredible opportunity that I just don't have and I can't affect in other asset classes. So that's why I say.
I love that. We have a question that David Decker put in the form, which I loved, and I have to bring it up. And David's here. So, hey, David, what is the best small test you use when reviewing a deal that you go to first that gives you an early go or no go?
So if I'm looking at a test, I'm looking at occupancy. Now, although I think self-storage is amazing, there's no more of a commodity than a cement floor. So if there is not demand in that market, there's very little you can do to fight it. So you do not fight the market. And the danger in self-storage, which is a very real danger, is overbuilding. That's what kills markets. And if you're in a small market, it can be years, if ever, that will recover. So demand is everything. If there's high demand, there's lots of opportunity. If there's low demand, you just don't go there. I look at vacancies and demand across the market. That's the number one step.
Okay, so another question is, do you have a preference for either buying land and building it or repurposing existing storage?
So we implement 3 models. My number one preference is making a lot of money. But let me share with you my 3 models. So my 3 models are: we buy, turn around. Yes. We convert buildings like Bankrupt Super Kmart, office buildings that I bought, turned into storage. And then there's the ground up build. These are very different ways to be in the same asset, and they're very different. Now, if we're looking at pure numbers, my preferred way is obviously acquiring, because that makes up the vast majority of what we do. Now, with that said, though, I always want to have those other 2 going on, and there's reasons for that. The benefits of acquiring is it's existing, and it's really easy to measure, right? But the downside with acquiring is I can't I can't change where it's at. I can't change what it's been built as. It's where it is. If I have the opportunity to get it, I can. With building, remember I said the most important thing is demand. I can find areas that just have incredibly high demand, and then I can pick the best spot that I know that asset will exceed incredibly in. That gives me a lot of power, right? To make an asset that'll be amazing. And it also changes the value because I can make it institutional grade. I can choose the exact units, service. You can do so much. It's very, very, very powerful. So it's not necessarily one or another. I implement all three, and the hybrid between those two is conversions, which is a whole nother kind of situation, which is a little more complicated and things like that. But those are the three methods we go in. The vast majority of everything we do is acquire and turn around. I didn't start developing until much later in the investing process. It was we would buy, turn around the assets based upon simple, well-known business strategies and practices. And we tried to improve first and foremost how to make those things increase the revenue. And then after we got really good at that and buying and turning around, then I started to build.
Oh my God, I love that. That is such a good explanation of your business model and what really it should be, right? Like you're diversifying. You're obviously going to spend time on plans and permitting if you're going to do a new build. And in the meantime, doing conversions, doing acquisitions, like perfect situation. Taj has a very good question. And I know you and I went through your whole underwriting model, but where can we find market analysis for locating demand for self-storage?
Okay, this is the best question you could ask as far as how do we understand demand? Now, there's two ways that people understand demand in storage, okay? The first way is just the analytical approach, which we look at how much square foot is on the market, okay? Right. So how much square feet per capita is existing in that market? Now, the problem is in self-storage, there is no demand. Every market is different. Some markets can have 12 square feet per capita and still have high demand. Other markets have no demand at 6 square feet per capita. I've seen both. What happens, and the reason is a whole bunch of reasons, which I'm not going to get too much into, but we do a hybrid approach. And what we look for, if I'm developing under 10 square feet per capita, that's a given. And I really want under 8 square feet because I don't even want to mess anything up. But we secret shop. I'm calling up and I'm saying, can I get a unit? What units do you have available? And we create what we call heat maps, where I map out and I look at the demand in every single type of unit in every different area. And that's just by calling, talking to people. There's a software that's called Radius Plus, which we can also pull information of, but you have to do both. There is no quick, where's demand? That doesn't work in self-storage. And people that try to just make it simple, right, they get in trouble fast. So you need to find out where what the square foot per capita is. Then you need to find out how that square foot is being utilized. So I say, understand the numbers, then understand how those numbers are being utilized. And then you need to understand the next thing. This is step 3. What is coming onto the market? Okay. And the most important thing to look at is this. When you're looking at a market, let's say we go back to the first step and you see there's a total of 500 or 200,000 square feet in this small town on the market, but there's so much demand. And so somebody says, I'm going to go build there and I'm going to build 100,000 square feet big facility. And we say, great. So how do you know that there's enough demand to fill that? Well, both of the facilities are full. Well, you're increasing that market by 50%. You're doing a 50% increase in the inventory in that entire market. Do you really know that that market can absorb that much square footage? The question is, I don't.
Yeah.
So if I don't know, I'm not doing it. And I don't know how you could know. So if I'm in a market that I'm going to buy, and I know that they're building 2 projects, and that's going to shift the total square footage in that market above putting new inventory on above 15%, I'm going to be very nervous because I don't know how much that market could absorb at those levels, right? Mm-hmm. So the most important thing is demand, understanding how it's being utilized, and if it will continue.
Love that. Thank you. We do have some other questions, which we're going to get to in a second. But what do you think is the biggest risk with owning self-storage today?
Okay, so there's a couple risks with self-storage today. Mm-hmm. The first risk and the primary risk is that self-storage is hot. Yeah, it's hot. And there are people that have been in self-storage for a few years. I know people that are literally buying hundreds of millions of self-storage and they've been in the game for 4 years. And during the last 4 years, it is the greatest rise in self-storage. Not even like it's unquantifiable. It is such an anomaly of what's happened in the last 4 years. And there's a lot of people out there that think they are geniuses because they've been in the market where it's basically doubled in 4 years.
Wow.
And we get confused on causation and correlation, and they starts to become self-fulfilling prophecies, right? And we start saying it'll always go up. I don't understand what the dangers is. I've never seen it. And we end up with a lot of people that you have to remember before 2008, nobody wanted self-storage. Nobody invested in it.
Right.
It was a crappy asset.
Yeah.
And people go, well, look how good it did during 2008. I said, well, that's true. But I mean, we've doubled the amount of storage in the United States since then. So it's not the same. It's just not. If we had another 2008, storage would not do like it did. The reason it did so well is there wasn't a lot of it.
Yeah.
It's everywhere now. So understanding where we are in the market cycle is extremely important. And also understanding when assets of any kind, I don't care what it is, get to a point where the investors become feverish and they start saying things like it's recession proof. And right now that is very trendy in self-storage. You want a recession proof asset that it survives recessions, great. Self-storage is the one. The reason why I hate this is that's what they said about housing. And that's what they say about every single asset when it does really, really good. That's stupid. We all know that as investors. Nothing is recession proof, and not even, I would say, recession resistant. And the reason too, most people think that asset class did so well during 2008 because they view it on an occupancy level.
Yeah.
Occupancies didn't drop. But in self-storage, occupancies don't have to drop, and I can cut revenue by 50%. I bought a lot of bankrupt facilities in a time when there weren't even very much, and there was astronomical demand because there wasn't a lot, and they still went bankrupt. So don't fall into a dream of an asset that's perfect. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
All assets go through cycles. They will all fail at some point in a given cycle if you buy them poorly and you don't do them right. So the biggest risk is hubris and itself. So like I said, the biggest risk to self-storage is self-storage itself.
Right.
And if you can remember that, keep a cool head and invest like you would in any other business that has risks and downsides, everything like that, you'll avoid all of that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what good advice. Okay, so we're going to give AJ a little break, and I'm going to spotlight an audience member. Now, the reason I like doing this is I make you guys fill out a form when you first register for the meetup, and it's really to understand my audience, right? So, and my audience is very well split between new investors and seasoned investors. And we have all these amazing rock star speakers that come on here, but where did they start? So I always like to bring on someone that just started investing a year ago, 2 years ago. How did they build their business? How did they start in the more current market? So I am so excited to introduce to you Tony Robinson. Not to be mistook for Tony Robbins. This is Tony Robinson. I met Tony not too long ago, and his story was so inspiring. I just had to share him with all of you. Like within 5 minutes of talking to him, I'm like, dude, like my audience has got to meet you. So Tony defied all odds as a young Black male who became a dad at the age of 16. He quickly scaled the corporate ladder at companies like Tesla and has now become a full-time real estate investor. He's 30 years old and started investing exactly 2 years ago and has a short-term rental portfolio of almost $4 million today. Just so exciting, Tony. Most exciting thing, Tony is the host of the Bigger Pockets Rookie podcast, where he interviews real estate investors about how they kickstarted their real estate careers. His wife, Sarah, and him are also famous YouTubers. Like you have to go watch their YouTube videos. They're so fun. Tony, we're so excited to have you.
Like, thanks so much for having me. And that bio would have sounded so much cooler had it come before AJ's. But I think after hearing AJ's story, like anybody's bio probably doesn't sound as good. So AJ, man, I love your story, brother, and super excited, man, to kind of hear that firsthand. But like, thanks for having me on, and hopefully I can give some value to the folks here.
Oh my God, Tony, tell us how you got started. Like, why did you pick real estate?
Yeah. Like you said, I got started almost exactly 2 years ago. I closed on my first real estate deal on October 29th, 2019. So we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary. And just growing up, I always kind of had the entrepreneurial bug. My dad was a wholesaler back in like 2005 to 2008. He kind of lost everything when the recession hit, and the advice he gave me was that he made a lot of money like flipping contracts to other investors, but had he just kept some of that, he would have held on to some of that wealth. So he taught me that lesson early on. So I knew as soon as I had some capital saved up that I wanted to kind of get into the game. And after I got my big boy job after college, I saved up some cash and got that first deal a couple of years ago.
That's amazing. Why did you pick the asset class that you did?
Yeah, so we primarily focus on short-term rentals, like the vacation rental space is our thing. When I first started that first deal that we bought 2 years ago, it was a long-term rental. We bought it in Louisiana. I live in California, so we did long distance, and I think we were cash flowing like $150 per month on that one property. And, when you do the math on, your W-2 income and $150 per month, like you need a lot of those little singles to kind of make a big dent. So I knew early on that I wanted to scale into something bigger, into a kind of a more heavy cash flow asset class. We looked at maybe getting into like apartment syndication and some other things, but we landed on short-term rentals because the barrier to entry is a little bit lower than some of the commercial real estate things. There's still really good, attractive financing options in that space. And it's just kind of cool, owning cool properties and really cool, trendy, hip destinations that kind of appeal to us as well.
So where do you guys own them?
Yeah, so we invest in 2 markets right now. We are in Joshua Tree, California, which is a national park here in SoCal. And then we also invest in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, so the Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge area of Tennessee.
I have to tell you, like I was in Joshua Tree a couple of years ago, and we stayed in an Airbnb. It's like one of the coolest spots in the country, I think. So great job on picking that location.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been super trendy like the last couple of years. There's been a lot of people going there.
So tell us, how did you land the podcast host of one of the hottest rookie podcasts in the country?
Yeah, it's still super surreal to me. Like I woke up the other day and we had hit number 7 on the business podcast charts for Apple. And
I have to call out Ashley Kerr because she is such a good friend of mine, and she is Tony's co-host. So go Ashley and Tony.
For sure. She definitely carries me. I'm just kind of like riding her coattails on the podcast there, but
she carries all of us. That's just
yeah, there you go. But I actually have my own podcast before the rookie show, and it was kind of focused to a similar audience. Mine was about, newer investors kind of getting their first deal done. And through that podcast, I got connected with the Bigger Pockets team, and when they were looking for a new host to kind of come on, they reached out and said, "Hey, we kind of like what you're doing, and feel it might make sense if we join forces. And who's going to say no to Bigger Pockets?" So I said, "Yeah, of course," and kind of off to the races from there.
And what has that done for you and your real estate investing career?
It's changed my life tremendously. Just aside from, just kind of having that host, I think the biggest thing is just like the people I've been able to meet, the relationships I've been able to build, and just like so many smart people that have, kind of been able to pour into me and just teach me so many things. So I'm just forever grateful for that opportunity. And then from a business side, I think it's allowed us to scale. I think in the first 12 months that we were doing short-term rentals, we bought, I think 13 or 14 houses that we've converted into short-term rentals. So it's been a good ride on both sides.
Hey, I was talking to someone and they said you had a very lofty goal. So tell us what your goal is.
Well, right now, as we're starting to scale, we want to get to 1,000 short-term rental units by the end of 2023. So the strategy, we're not going to be able to do that just by buying single family houses. So the goal is to kind of get into like the boutique motel and hotel space. Kind of similar to what AJ was saying about self-storage. Like if you look in the smaller motel space, it's very still mom and pop run. So there's an opportunity there to kind of get in and shake things up.
I love it. And I wish you all the best of luck and success, because I know that you're such a hustler and you're going to get it. You're going to do it. And we're going to have you back here in 2023 and we're going to talk about that story.
Yeah, fingers crossed we can get there. But, either way, whether we get there, whether we don't, I think just, part of the fun is just in the journey. So I'm excited either way.
Yeah, exactly. What do you want to leave us with? If you could, inspire our audience with one thing that maybe, helped you along your journey, like what would that be?
If I had one piece of advice for everybody, it's that don't be afraid to dream big. It's like 2 years ago, I didn't even have a rental property. And now, we've got this portfolio. I'm a podcast host, we're writing books, doing all these other things. And I think part of it is just because I had the courage to dream big enough to kind of chase after those things. So, AJ's given all the technical things you can chase that, but just from like a mindset perspective, I think just having the courage to set really, really big goals for yourself.
Oh my God, I love that. That is a great way to leave us. I thank you so much for coming on. And it's just been such a pleasure getting to know you and like just following you on all your different social media. So go find Tony on YouTube. Go find Tony on Instagram. Go find Tony on the Bigger Pockets Rookie podcast. Like just go find Tony. Just be inspired because he inspires me every day. So thank you, Tony.
Yeah, it's so sweet. Hopefully you guys got some value from that. And I guess we'll turn it back to AJ. But yeah, pleasure chatting with you guys.
Oh my God. I was just so excited to meet him in person because I've heard so much about him from Ashley. He's such a rock star. We have a very special guest that just joined us, Yona Weiss. Yona comes on my show only when there's another handsome bearded man on it. So he was here when Brandon was here, and he's now here when AJ's. I see how it goes, Yona. I see how it goes.
Beards got to stick together.
Yeah, exactly. No, I love it. AJ, it's so good to see you. I heard you weren't going to be on here. Had to stop by.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. So AJ, one really, really important thing that I think most people, like most successful people, fail to kind of realize is the need to scale, right? The need to take your business to the next level. Otherwise you become stagnant. Otherwise, you're not really pushing boundaries. You're not part of the cutting edge of any kind. And I think two main factors with scaling up are the right team and the right, finding capital. And I've had the pleasure of meeting your team. I've met Kaylee and Connor and Brian and Ava, all rock stars, right? So how do you find, when you're looking to find your team or hire the right people, what are you looking for?
This is a fantastic question. And scale is probably one of my favorite subjects to talk about because it's not something you talk about when you're big. It's something you think about and talk about when you're starting. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people mix that up. And I'm not sure why, but that's got to change. If you're getting started, you should be thinking really about scale. And what Tony said gets to the heart of it when he said, I have my W-2 and then I bought a door that makes $150 a month. And he realized, well, I'm going to have a lot of doors to move the needle. And so then he started thinking about, instead of saying, oh, this isn't worth it, how can I do that? Mm-hmm. And that when you get started, you need to really take account of what needs to happen. And when I'm looking at overall scale, we have your overall team that you're working with. And I'm not talking about hiring. People are like, I can't hire. I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about, right? You need to cultivate opportunities and you need to have resources in which you don't inherently have. You need to be very self-aware and know all the things you're horrible at and you have no talent for, right? For me, that's unlimited amount of things that I have no talent for and I'm horrible at. So I just say, all right, that's fine. Let's figure out what those things are. Then I also figure out what I'm good at. And it's not about saying, oh, I have to be good at everything. In fact, that is the exact opposite. That's the exact opposite. That kills you. And this is a pride thing. People starting out, they just get killed by this idea. You have this arc of this investor or entrepreneurial story that I did this, in my garage. Apple started out in a garage. And it was also helped by a massive venture capital company that invested billions of dollars. And they had whole teams to do marketing and they could hire the best and highest grade. But we don't need to talk about that. It would just happen to be in a garage, and for some reason it just sparked. Success doesn't happen like that. It makes for great stories, right? We all want to be what is called self-made, which I think is the most poisonous thing ever. You can't do it by yourself, so stop trying. You need to figure out who you need in your life to accomplish those goals, the areas in which you have weaknesses, and how to benefit from everyone and how to move forward like that. And it needs to be organic. And that's how I view when I'm pulling in team members and other people like that. It needs to be organic. I look for a few things first. I look for trustworthy, loyalness, and then I look for hard work, because I believe that skills can be taught. Now, that's true. I don't mean that when I'm talking about my attorney or my accountant. They can be great hard workers, but unless they know what they're doing, obviously, but when I'm looking for my organization of people to come with me, I tell everybody when they come in, when they interview, if you don't want to be here in 20 years, don't be here for 20 days. I don't want you. Like, we have to build something together. And that's how I view everyone in my life. Like, if you're in my life, you're in my life forever, or I don't want you in it for a minute. I don't have time to waste, and I don't want to waste with people that, aren't awesome and that I don't love and that aren't going to be great. And so that's how you need to approach scale. Everything needs to be looking with the end in mind, but you don't need to have any of the answers on how to get there. The path to get to that end destination, right? That you have to figure out on your own. You need to have the resources that allow you to walk down that path. So when I looked at people, and I looked at people that were either in the industry that I knew how. Kaylee's a perfect example. I knew Kaylee. She was awesome. She had a great reputation in the self-storage world.
Awesome.
And so I was like, okay, well, she was working for a property management company. So I just went and tried to buy the company. They wouldn't sell it to me, which I was really frustrated with. So I didn't get Kaylee. But that company ended up going away. She went and got another job. I found out that she went and worked somebody else, and I went and got her. That was a long-term thing. I knew her, I knew of her. And it was like, I view it as you find the right people and you figure out where they go on the bus, right? And that's really important. You figure out where they should be sitting, but they have to be the right person. And I do that with all my executives at my company were not hired from Indeed or anything else like that. None of the people that we either brought them up through the company. They were a manager sitting in a storage facility, right? Or I knew them, or we had a relationship and contact, and I knew their skills, and I knew what they were good at and what they could be, and I knew what I wasn't, and that was what was important. I said, hey, you would fit and play a really good role in my organization here, and I need you to grow the company. And so approaching it with that mentality, it needs to be organic for key positions, right? Now, I use Indeed. We're hiring 10 employees like every single day. So for when I look at the routine work, things like that, people that maybe don't want to be or career, that stuff, we need to hire, we need to get somebody in, we need to train them, then we want them to stay, we need to incentivize them, move it up. But when you're talking about your team that builds, that's going to create, that you got to go down that journey with, that really needs to be organic, and it needs to be the right fit.
I love that so much. It's so important to have the right team, to surround yourself with, because I am also hiring my team, and just like looking at the different aspects is just elevating my own business so much more than if I were to do it alone, right? So great tip. Okay, so here's the thing about AJ, and then we're going to leave it to audience Q&A, and then we're going to do one breakout room. But here's the amazing thing about AJ. His brain never shuts down. I have had some of the most scintillating conversations with him, and he's always thinking of the next big idea. Like every time I'm with him, he's like, okay, so I have this amazing idea that we're going to go and implement. And sure enough, like within a few months, it's already implemented and it is thriving. And it's really, really cool to see. And he always has cool things brewing. So because of his ability to think clearly, explain complex ideas in simple terms, he gets asked to mentor people all the time. And he finally decided to start the CRE circle. Not sure if many of you know about it. Not sure if you're in the CRE circle. If you are in a CRE circle, go put in the chat that you are in CRE. It is such a great tribe that he and our good friend Brittany Arneson have put together. If there's anyone looking to invest in multifamily commercial deals, this is the community you want to be in. AJ, can you talk to us about the CRE Circle? What is your intention behind creating it, and what does it offer?
Yeah, we talk about this need of tribe, we find, I look for areas that have holes in the markets, needs that aren't being needed. That's how we got into self-storage. I got into technology companies from that. And it was never like, I never set out, I want to be necessarily in storage. I would never set out, I want to own a technology company. It was like, hey, there's a need and there's a vehicle that needs to happen, and we need to use this to get to where we're trying to go. And when, me and Brittany were working together on a deal, she was helping me fund it. We were looking at all this deals, and we talked about her transition moving from single family homes, trying to get into commercial, and out in the marketplace, it was like everything with commercial. I don't know what it is about commercial people, but they're kind of stuck up. And I mean that in the nicest way for anybody in commercial, but it's true. They are. They think they're just like so incredible. And so they charge it like you won't even talk to them. And there's just, it's like, you got to pay me $20,000. I just hate that stuff. Yeah. So we thought we need like bigger pockets is really good for people getting into real estate. First of all, I don't believe that you need to start in single family homes to get into real estate. I didn't. I don't think anybody did. But there's no place, and there wasn't really anything set up to talk about going into commercial real estate.
Yeah.
To talk about having a group that's like, let's go into commercial real estate now. So the CRE circle became that. It became a way that we could work with lots of people. We could train, we could give resources to, that we could have network effect, we could do deals, we could analyze in commercial real estate. So people could get into commercial real estate, or if they're already in it, they can come in and they work with other people. So it became kind of this idea where it was like, hey, this should exist. It doesn't. And we're like, okay, well then let's make it. I don't like one-on-one coaching or personal things like that, because I make my money in real estate. That's what I do. I don't spend money. I don't have coaching programs. The CRE Circle allowed a way that we could have a group, which I could talk to, teach, train all these people. It's a more of like a, community sense, and we're all trying to achieve the same goals. And we put in everything from lessons. We're just thinking, what would everybody need within it? And it's been growing like crazy. There's obviously a big need, and a lot of people say, I want to get into commercial real estate, or even I should be at least looking at it and how. And that's kind of where the CRE Circle came from.
I love that. Like I've been in the CRE Circle since you guys started, like the webinars, the amount of information you give out, it's just like amazing. Because, it's hard to, like, I think it's much easier to find information on single family fix and flip and multi-family syndications, but like with more commercial, more specialized commercial, I think it's much harder to find that tribe. So this is amazing.
Yes.
I would highly recommend you guys go check it out, shoot AJ your questions, or Brittany, find them on Instagram. They're all over Instagram. It's amazing.
If you're really wanting to know about self-storage, I have the #1 self-storage podcast, and we just talk everything about storage. Like it's super nerdy and in depth, which I like. But then I also have my other podcast, which is all business, wealth, investing related, but Instagram, AJ Osborne, Instagram. You can go to the Circle. It has our information there. You can email me at my site as well. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of and find.
Yeah, you are. Yona raised his hand. Go ahead, Yona.
I figured no one else was going to raise their hand. Oh, maybe people will, but I saw no one was. So I figured you got to jump in first, right?
Yes, for sure.
Nachshon. So Leica told me to ask you about how you, what kind of shampoo and conditioner you use for your beard. No, I'm just kidding.
Listen, I don't give away my secrets, Yona. I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, seriously.
Like how to own a massive portfolio, he'll give away, but
not the beard.
Not the beard.
Not the beard. Anything with the beard. So the question I have is, obviously you have gone full force into self-storage, and you guys are building up something incredible. Are there any other asset classes that you are pursuing or have considered pursuing?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So there's a few assets and our end goal is what we're doing in self-storage is we're essentially integrated on all the different levels. And then so we can execute at scale and get really, really big. So our plan is in the next 2 years to hit the $1 billion portfolio mark. And then we want to act more like the Blackstone, where we have all of these asset types in which our company, Cedar Creek, owns and runs. So our next foray, which is probably going to be next year, is light industrial. The economics behind light industrial I have loved for the past 5 years, and they've only gotten better. A lot of the economic forces that create value in it are the same drivers within storage, as far as how the economy is functioning, working, last mile product services. I'm not going to get into it all, but I really like light industrial. I think it's a winner, but I think most of the opportunity in some of those other asset classes are on the development side. So there's huge upside in developing light industrial. And two, you can do it really small. So if I was starting out, to be totally honest, I would probably develop some light industrial, 3 units, costing me probably $500,000 to build, right? Yeah. And then you fill them up, and then it's going to be worth 1.2 million the day that I have to have 3 tenants, which every light industrial, the moment it's approved, you can sell your concepts and they're leased. It's just crazy. So, I mean, you're talking about a 6-month valuation of like $700,000 off 500,000. It's absolutely stellar. And those are long-term businesses. And I like the revenue model, things like that. So I really like light industrial. I really like some different aspects about commercial on the lines of more like multi-use. Yeah. So changing in the way that people utilize real estate in general and work in, I like a lot of that. I always love multifamily for what multifamily is. And that will never change and never go away, ever. Problem is, I have no knowledge of it, so I'm going to have to wait. And what I'll do when I enter those asset classes, I'm going to go find a rock star multifamily person, and they're going to come in and start the fund up. Because that's just, it's hard for me to ever not talk about multifamily because it's a staple and it will always perform the way you want real estate to perform. And it's probably the lowest risk and over the long run, the highest consistent value potential.
Okay, next question. Masha.
Hey, AJ. Hi, Leka.
Hi.
Yes. Hello. Great. So I want to ask you, AJ, about conversion project.
Yes.
So tell me, what are you exactly looking for when you're looking at that empty retail space, right? Or that warehouse? What are things you would say, okay, no, this is not going to work? Like, I know probably some height, some concrete, like on the flooring, the square footage, zoning. What is it that for you tells that it's not going to work?
Okay, that's a great question. Now, there's a few layers to conversions that we got to talk about. For all of you that don't maybe understand what conversions is, it was this wonderful thing. It is this wonderful thing, but I fell in love with it like 7 years ago. And it was the idea that you have an asset. So commercial real estate and most real estate derives its value. Their value is predicated on the revenue it produces, right? That's why we use things like cap rates. It's what return can I get off of that? So depending on how that revenue may fluctuate, the actual building itself will change massively in value, which in a lot of times and situations is very inefficient. And the market isn't pricing things accordingly, or there's just transition times. So we find this in opportunity a lot when markets kind of go crazy. And the retail apocalypse, you have these ginormous buildings that were worth 20 million that are now worth nothing because the tenants that they were supposed to house no longer exist, and nobody wanted a 100,000 square foot building. So now you have all these people that own these buildings that were valued at, literally tens of millions. And there is no idea of where the revenue will even come from. There's no way to price it. What do you even do with it? So none of them would sell them. Nobody would know it. And there was no way that any logical buyer could say, I'm going to get a revenue off this that would be anywhere comparable to what Kmart, Shopko, or anybody else was going to do. It didn't exist. So while they've had no way to attribute value, their values cratered. Well, we could buy it at this low value. Now let's say it's 6 million. I'd sell off the parking lot for 3 million. Then I could build out 4 million, 5 million, get into this huge building in a main downtown location for under $10 million. But then I can attribute a price per square foot that was even at times higher than the former tenant. Now it's all of a sudden worth tens of millions again. So a conversion is converting one asset's utilization into another. We did this with office buildings right when COVID started and the markets froze, right? There was office buildings that everybody's like, these will be empty forever. Markets froze, buyers evaporated, and we went to the bank and I bought downtown 5 acres right on the last major exit to downtown for pennies on the dollar. And because nobody's like, you can't get any revenue from this. We bought it and we're going to turn it into a storage facility and the same thing. So when I look for conversions, I'm looking for almost this arbitrage. I know my revenue that I can derive from that square footage within this usage. I need the usage of the asset to no longer work. And then I can apply this business model, this utilization, over it and change its function. And then I get the spread on it. That usually is attributed to super high demand areas and with high rental areas and in areas that the buildings are fairly big because they've lost that utilization. So we generally find 100,000 square feet plus to be the best because nobody wants that much space anymore to use and people get nervous. So at times like where we're at right now in the market, it can be much harder to find conversion opportunities because it just seems like everything's super expensive. And so you got to make sure you can get that spread. Other people, though, I've seen do it on smaller bowling alleys that shut down because of COVID. I've seen skating rinks that everybody's like, what am I supposed to do with this building? Nobody wants to utilize it. But the smaller you get, generally speaking, you can find other business models like retail centers or pawn shops or something else like that that may acquire that asset. Then you just have to look at the value of it and your model and place it over top and see if that spread is big enough.
Tony, you're up next.
Yeah. So AJ, you were talking about like the light industrial stuff, which you said is an asset class that you're not in yet. So I'm like, how are you doing the research for that? Is there like a light industrial trade journal or something that you're reading? Like where are you getting that information from to make you say, okay, this is the next thing to go into?
So most of the information I get is actually not on the asset class itself. So I look at I read a lot about different economic situations, supply chain disruption in supply chains. I look at retailers' last mile problems, and then we look at the decentralization of companies. One of the reasons office space is worried. So what you're having is this idea of centrally located workforces have been fragmented. And then you have the supply chain for products, which was totally predicated or used to be predicated on a retail distribution model, no longer works. And now it is a house-to-house model. It's a delivery model. Well, now you have a problem with how do I get the products to the house? So I can go out. Most shipping happens where it comes in outside the side of town, right? The major shipping port for all of Northern California, for example, is Reno. It's not even in California. But then you have the last mile, as we call it. How do I get that to that good? That's where the utilization in small businesses will use to distribute and to hold and to run products. They are now not working in their office, they're working off-site, but I need a place to go. I now need to do manufacturing. But the price of traditional office space and different space like that is skyrocketed right along with the skyrocketing overall rules, right, and regulations associated with owning a house. So as a carpenter, I used to be able to work out of my house. In the last 10 years, that's changed. I now have HOAs, no neighbors are planned. So I actually have to leave my place of living to do the work that I want to do. So now I have to find a new location to work. 20 years ago, that didn't exist. You'd build a shop on the side of your house. So it's the whole economic realm of what are the drivers of different real estate asset classes. And the drivers of light industrial have been starting a long ways. And we saw this with the advent of online shopping. And it was projecting those trends forward and understanding what the causation of those trends would be. And so light industrial was like, man, this is super undervalued. Demand will skyrocket. It will only continue to skyrocket. And COVID just made it go like fire, because we've now implemented technology that allows people to not centrally aggregate to work.
Okay, one last question from our audience. Then we have a question on funding, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms. So Chris, you're up next.
Hey, AJ and Leica, thank you so much for hosting this. Incredible story. Been following you guys for a while. So this is awesome. Two-parter here, and they're both pretty general. So we have a wholesaling operation. We've got acquisitions and marketing built up, and we're going to start dedicating a lot of that to self-storage and possibly some triple net acquisitions. For someone wanting to break into self-storage, first part of the question is, what would you recommend doing private loans or debt or equity partnership for the first deal?
Okay, that's a great question. It could be twofold, and it could be a hybrid model. You want to utilize in general debt as much as you can, especially when you're starting, and not give away equity, because you got to compound those returns. So I would do probably a hybrid model where I would use debt, then equity, but on the equity, I would have a refinance, and I would pay out the equity partners upon refinance when starting out, because you need to be able to control the asset. Why do you need to be able to control the asset? You need to be able to loan against it. You need to be able to borrow against it so you can buy next properties. You need to have that on your balance sheet. So you can use equity, get the debt financing in, improve the property, refinance it, refinance those equity holders out. Now you own the whole property by yourself, and lots of times you don't even need to put the money into it. Yeah.
I was trying to jot down those notes as quick as I could, but yeah, I think I got the gist of it there. Other part of the question is, what would you say would be the best way to market to individually owned storage facilities that are in distress?
So I have two ways of going. There's the mass marketing, everything else like that. But this is maybe a little too basic, but it works for me. Before really this year or last year, all our deals came off market. I had not bought an on-market deal until this year. And how we did it was twofold. We used brokers to bring us off-market deals. You go find it, I'll pay you a higher commission, you bring it to me, and you've got to be very specific on what you want. Or I would go directly to owners. And what I would do, as opposed to when everybody else was mass mailing them, I would pick my target market based upon markets that were good as far as demand goes. I'd identify all the facilities in that market, the ones that had good location. Then I would line up all of those facilities, and I'd find the ones that were mom and pop run. They were not run, they were either distressed. I'd identify all of those. Then I would go find the owner, and then I would try to meet the owner. I'd try to talk to him. I'd take him out to lunch, to dinner. I'd do the things that nobody else is going to do, right? I'd actually try to build a relationship with them. And when you're starting out, to say, hey, you have a storage facility, I'm interested in this asset class. Can I pick your brain on how you've been successful, how you got this? Did you build it? Like, I would love to know more about your process. Then as you're building a relationship with them, you can then ask them, I want to get into this. Would you be willing to sell me? And if you would, what would you want out of it? How would that work? And if not, do you know somewhere where I can go to find assets like yours? Or do you know anyone that would be willing to sell? And it's an organic way, instead of having a conversation, that you can really find out if they're willing to sell, if they're not, right? As opposed to just no. Calling, hey, will you sell me your asset? No. Yeah. Mailers, no, right? You're giving them a choice to say no. So you want it to be more dynamic and open, particularly on your first deal, because you have the time, you can hunt, right? I don't do that anymore because I don't have the time to do it, right? And that's your benefit when you're starting out. I did all the things that nobody else would do. And because of that, we were successful and got assets. Now that I'm where I'm at, I have to use totally different strategies because it doesn't work anymore for me. And I can't place at that scale.
Incredible. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we have a question from Taj. She says, how do you find funding for self-storage?
So it used to be very, very hard. Now banks love funding self-storage facilities. It is the belle of the ball, and you should use it. Everybody wants to be in self-storage right now. So investors forums, that online forums, going and saying, hey, interested in. The key thing is you get a deal first. If you get a deal, then you can get the funding. If I got a deal and I can go onto an online forum saying I need funding, or you can go to places like, one of the best, particularly starting out, because you can get a small business loan, is Live Oak Bank. They specialize in small business loans for self-storage, right? And then if you're looking for an equity partner, you have that deal. You can work on getting financing, and then you can go to forums, go to meetups, and talk about the deal that you have. Because now you can get investor partners, because you can actually show the return that you're going to get. And that makes a big difference.
I just want to say, AJ, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your wisdom, and spending, your precious time with us. I have learned so much in these, few minutes you've been with us. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. This was a blast, Lika.